Hello everybody. Thought I would do one more, well I think it's one more, whoever knows. One more video on the Mac Pro. And this evening I want to talk about the graphics card that I chose to put in it. And that is the AMD Radeon Pro W5700. This is a Navi card. It slots between the RX 5700 and the RX 5700 XT. And I think it performs pretty close to the RX 5700 XT. So at this point I have an RX 6800. Why wouldn't I just end with that? And really it works fine in the Mac Pro. The power without pixels is fine. Not the XT, the RX 6800. So why would I change? Well, there was kind of this realization that at the 1440p resolution I was leaving a lot of performance on the table. The RX 6800, when I bought it, it was $550. It was easily worth 3 times what the rest of the system was worth. And so if you pay $300 or $400 for a graphics card and you put it in a Mac Pro, it doesn't really make sense to do that if I'm going to lose a lot of the performance of the graphics card. And so I did some testing and basically found out that at 1440p, 3440 by 1400, the Tomb Raider benchmark, I could get something like 77, 79 frames per second on the Mac Pro, and go clear up to 92 frames per second on on another computer which I bought. Now this other computer is a Hewlett-Packard Z440. It has a Xeon processor, 6-core, 12-thread, that's about 5 or 6 years newer than the X5690 that I have in the Mac Pro. And everything about the Z440 is pretty much 2 times what the Mac Pro is. The Geekbench single core score, the Geekbench dual core score is double. The PCIe 3.0 bus is twice the speed of the PCIe 2.0 bus. And so when I put that card in that system, I get a lot higher frame rate out of that. But the price of it was not bad at all. I won it on auction. When I bought this thing, there were 14 of them up for sale, and they ranged in price in the $60s and $70 a piece. I got mine for $66, and that was without hard drive and without, it had a GPU in it, but it was a little cheapo GPU. And so it was a little bit of a bare bones systems, but it had the processor, it had 16 gigabytes of RAM. So I put some upgrades in, and for well under $200, I end up with a pretty decent system to put my RX 6800 and 20 frames per second improvement at the resolution that I game at. So that's where that card lives now. That belongs to that computer. So then back to the RX 580 in the 5.1 Mac Pro, and I have my HP computer to game on. I have my Mac computer to do Mac things on. And ultimately I kind of wanted to get back to gaming on the Mac Pro. I like the Mac Pro. I just like the Mac Pro. And I don't think there will be another computer ever that I like as much as the Mac Pro. And so I wanted to game on the Mac Pro again. And so I got looking around at GPUs, and this was what I picked as probably the best last GPU for the Mac Pro. So in my opinion, this GPU, and I'm going to show you some performance later on, but it's capable of gaming at 1440, not at super high resolutions, but depending on what you're playing, 50, 60 FPS at medium settings. Typically, sometimes you can go high settings and get that depending on the game. And I find out that that's pretty good. Medium settings look pretty good, and you really have to try to see the difference between medium and high and ultra. But whether I'm playing Flight Simulator or Plague Tale Requiem, I'm getting good enough frame rates out of this card and the Mac Pro. First of all, it'll load up in the Mac Pro. It'll go to 100%, where the RX 6800 never would. And it plays these games pretty decent. I'll show you some of that later. But while I have the card here, I want to show you some features about this. First of all, let me address the Radeon Pro. It's a Pro card. What does that mean? These cards are designed for, or they're marketed for, let's say, computer-aided design, manufacturing, similar uses like drawings and modeling and things like that. And the programs that we use, the Autodesk programs and such, are rated and tested to work with these cards. And so for whatever reason, they cost a lot more when you buy them. This card launched at like $799, which is several hundred at least more than an equivalent RX 5700 or 5700 XT. But when you buy them on the used market, the Pro cards aren't really all that much more than the regular gaming market cards. For example, here are some sold listings on eBay of W5700 Radeon Pros. And once you get past the non-working parts only cards, $112.50, $112.50, $122.50, $139, $130, $150, a couple $150 listings, $135, another $150, $160. So anywhere from $130 to $150 is pretty typical. Some people get a little bit less than that. I paid $132.50 for mine, and I thought it was a pretty good deal. And how does that compare with cards that don't have the Pro label on them? Well, here's the RX 5700 XT, which will give you a little more performance. But just scrolling down through some sold listings, we've got $104.50, $100, $105, $117, $118. So call it around $100 on average. Keep scrolling down until I find a reference model. Of course, with the 5700 XTs, there are a lot of non-reference models. Here's a reference model for $116.50. That's probably about the closest comparison you have, in the package between the W5700 and the RX 5700 XT. And this one's $116.50. So versus $132, so maybe $20-ish more for the Pro. And the Pro has a USB-C port on it, which the regular RX 5700 XT doesn't have. Some things I like about it for the Mac Pro. Well, first of all, the aesthetic of it. What could be more important than how it looks in your machine, especially when you put it in a Mac Pro that has this clean look without a lot of cables and such. It just looks good in there. The silver matches the silver on the aluminum case. The black accents go with the backplane really well, and it's a 2-slot blower card. So it fits there in the lower slot just fine, does not block the second slot up. And what that means is if I want to put a 16-lane card above it, I can do that. I can put this in the lower slot and I can put another card right on top of it. I can put a card that covers that much of it without blocking the fan at all. I could probably even go into the fan a little bit and really not block the air entry into the fan. And then this blower pushes it through directly outside. So the hot air comes straight outside the case, doesn't go into the case at all. That means the air that comes into the case is going to be cool air. That's not going to be preheated because it's already been through the GPU once or twice. And so somebody pointed out in one of the posts I read that all of the original Mac Pro were blower cards. All of the original Mac Pro GPUs were blower cards, and they certainly were. Every one of them that shipped with a Mac Pro was that, and therefore the case was designed around that. The case wasn't designed to move enough air through for this type of card that's putting a lot of heat into the case. So that's kind of an advantage of the blower card. They have the reputation of not cooling as well as the open air coolers, and not cooling as well and being noisier because we have just this one small fan instead of multiple axial fans, so it has to turn faster and that makes it noisier. So there are pros and cons with it. In my experience so far, I've had this card for several weeks, maybe a month now. I've played through Plague Tale Requiem, which is a fairly new and fairly demanding game, and 55, 60 FPS, very near 100% all the time. Load on the card. Haven't seen any reason to think that the card was throttling or holding back performance. And the noise, you can hear it, but to me it's not a problem. It's not that noisy that it's a problem. And so I don't really see a problem with the blower cooler in this card. Another thing to remember about these cards is that as these cards go on in generation, every new generation is more power efficient than the generation before. So to get the same performance of this out of a Vega, let's say previous generation card, That fan had to spin a lot faster because that card was making a lot more heat for the same graphics output that this one does. So that kind of helps with the cooling issue and everything. But like I say, to me, it's not an issue. The fan, the cooling system, not an issue. Not the noise, not the performance. Seems to be working fine. Let's see, let's go to this end of the card. And I know this camera doesn't like to focus when I go easy, so go in, so I will stay along. So it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mini DisplayPort connectors on it, and it has a USB-C. Now when I got the RX 6800 that I did a video on before, it also had a USB-C, and my experience with that is I could get video pass-through on it, but I could only get USB functionality in Windows, and I didn't get USB functionality in macOS. I had seen somebody else said if your Mac OS is beyond this certain version, you should be able to use the USB on it. So here's my experience with this. When I plug an external SSD in here, I get better speeds from this port than I do any other port on my system, and that includes the USB 3.0 card I have. This is faster, quite a bit. However, when I do a boot, when I reboot the system or shut it off, if I have anything plugged into here, it doesn't display at all. So I suppose if I had a display plugged in here, it probably would display on that, but if I have a flash drive or a mouse, anything plugged into here, I get no display. And so what I have to do is shut the computer down, unplug whatever's in here, reboot the computer, with the display connected to one of these mini display ports, and then I can plug my SSD in here and take advantage of the high speed. So a little weirdness there, but it works well. So the next thing I want to do is talk about the power on this. And in some of my videos before, I've kind of always talked about the power situation. This card has a 6-pin and an 8-pin connector. So just real basics. On any PCIe card, the slot is supposed to provide up to 75 watts of power. If the card needs more than that, then they put a 6-pin on, which is good for 75 watts of power. If 75 watts isn't enough, they'll put an 8-pin on, which is good for up to 150 watts of power. And if you need more than that, you can do a 6 and an 8 like this, or you can do a couple of 8s, or you can do a couple of 6s, which is the same as an 8. Both would be 150 watts in that case. In a Mac Pro, we have the two backplane connectors, mini 6-pins, that are good for 75 watts each. And that's with a question mark with my voice rising. Because they're 6 pins, and a 6-pin is good for 75 watts, as we know. But on Mac Rumors forum, and I'll leave a link to this, there's a discussion about that, and somebody went and found out that pins 1, 2, and 3 on the mini 6-pin connectors are all powered, plus 12 volts. The mini 6-pin, or the 6-pin spec, requires only 1 and 3 to be powered. So the pin 2 is optional. You can power pin 2, but you don't have to. In the 8-pin spec, pins 1, 2, and 3 are powered. So having 3 pins powered on the 6 is the same as 3 pins powered on the 8, so it should be good for 150 watts, right? Well, you go to the Apple technical manual and things like that, you will not find a rating for the mini 6-pin, so Apple doesn't say. People say that they're rated for 75 because it's a 6-pin, but users have tested and they found out that the mini 6-pins provide power up to 120 watts, and then the machine will shut down. Now there are dire warnings all over the Mac Pro Upgrade group and other places that if you put too powerful a GPU in and you power it from your backplane, you're going to burn it out. Your machine's going to go up in smoke. There's going to be a big crater. Nobody will ever know what happened to you because you just burned out your backplane. I'm not doubting that that's happened, but what I will say is I've tried to find somebody who described, I put this GPU in, I powered it this way, I know that it overdrew current and burned out my backplane. I've never seen that. Anybody on the forums, on Mac Pro Upgrade group, I've never seen anybody give a good detailed explanation that says that they've killed their backplane. I'm not doubting people have failed backplanes. What I'm doubting is their GPU caused it, because we also know there's been a lot of experience, a lot of write-ups on this, that if you run that power up to 120 watts per mini 6-pin, it'll shut the machine down. Okay. So if you take the 120 watts and you say, I don't want to hit that, I don't want to shut down, and you back it off maybe 20 watts or so for margin, for spikes, then 100 watts from each mini 6-pin connector should be doable. So, okay, you know, some people say they're good for 75, some people are going to say they're good for 100, with plenty of margin to spare. And so, well, let's look at this. All right, 150 and 75, 225 watts. This card can pull up to 225 watts from the backplane connectors, or from whatever's powering these two ports. Well, 225 watts divided by 2 is 112.5, which is under 120, which should be, you know, it's probably stressing the backplane a little bit, but not enough to hit a shutdown. But this card's only rated at 205 total, okay? And it's taking some power from the slot. And I don't know right at this point how much it's taking from the slot versus these two connectors. But let's say it's taking, it's 205, let's say it's taking 50 watts. So that leaves 155 watts divided by 2 is going to be, I can't do this math, you know, 75 plus-ish from each connector. That's not too much. That's not much of a stretch over even the very base what's connected. Now, if you do read the articles, read the write-ups, what people talk about is the imbalance. Okay? So if you're this card, if you're thinking like this card's going to think, like it's been programmed to think, that 8-pin's good for 150 watts, that 8-pin's good for 75. Whatever my current power draw is, I'm going to pull twice as much from the one rated at 150 as I'm going to pull from the other one. So if we got to the 120 watt, if we got to the shutdown, we're pulling 120 watts from this, we're pulling half as much from this, we're only pulling 60 watts here. So we're leaving 60 watts on the table. So what we want to do is really bridge these two together and balance the power draw. So we're getting, when we go back to the two mini 6-pin connectors on the back plane, we're taking the same amount of power from each. Alright, so here's how we're going to power this card. This is a dual mini 6-pin to 8-pin connector. This is the very cable that I used for the RX 580. I used it for the RX 5600 XT. I've probably used it for another card or two. So it takes, let's say you have a 150 watt power draw through this 8-pin. This is going to take 75 watts from each. What it does is it takes a wire from pin 1 on this connector and a wire from pin 1 on this connector, and it joins them together in the 8-pin. And it takes a wire from pin 2 on this connector and a wire from pin 2 on this connector, and it joins them together in the 8-pin. And it takes a wire from pin 3 on this connector and a wire from pin 3 on the other connector, and it joins them together in the 8-pin. So the 3 plus 12 volt wires are bridged. It also connects to the sense and the ground wires and connects those together. And so it bridges these two power sources together. And then, but for the card, I need an 8 and a 6. So how do I do that? Well, that's this extender cable. Put that down for a second. So this is a female 8-pin to dual 8-pin connectors, or actually there's 6 plus 2 connectors. So if I leave this slid together like this, it's an 8-pin connector. I need that for one of them. And then you slide it off, and I'm not going to do that because I don't want to stress the wires any more than I already have, but you slide the 2 pins off and it comes separate, and now that's a 6-pin connector. And so what I'll do is I'll take these two, put them in the card. Here's my 8-pin. And then for the 6-pin, I have this 2 pins separated off. There's a little spot there in the card, so I'm just going to stick it in there. There's nothing it can touch in there. And so there, I've got the power to the card, and I'm going to take that 8-pin and connect it to that 8-pin. And then I'm going to put the 2 mini 6 pins into the backplane. Okay, I'm working a little upside down here, so this might be a little awkward. But first I'll put the 2 mini 6 pins. Usually the sequence you want to follow when you put a GPU into a Mac Pro is find a way to connect to the backplane first, because once you get in the card in there, it's hard to get to the connectors. So I'll put that in there. Make sure they're both in, so I'll bring this out. Now I'll drop the card in. And I've already got the extender on the card. Dropped right in there. And so now I have this kind of longish cable, and of course this is the easiest way to connect this. I have SSDs in my drive bays with these adapters, and that makes it thinner this way than a regular hard drive, and because of that I have some room in here for the cables to go. So, you know, one of the things I like the most about the Mac Pro is just the look of it, the fact that there's not wires just running all over the place in here, and it's clean and everything. And so I don't want to clutter it up with all these cables. I kind of like the fact that these cables come out of the end rather than the front here, that you know, where we typically have our power cable connectors. That makes it look nice and clean. So what I'm going to do is take this and connect it together. I'm just going to put my extra right here on top of the CPU fan. Turn that sideways to fit. Even with the SSDs in there, there's still not a lot of room above that fan. There. So I'll just tuck that above the CPU fan, and that gets the cables kind of out. I typically like using black cables, but I didn't find any kind of extender like that would work there. So I'm going to pick this up a little bit, so hopefully you can see a little better into there. And so you can see the features, like I was saying, that the 16 lane slot is still available there. I can put a card there, and if it's not too long a card, it won't affect the fan at all. And so that's what it looks like in there. Now let's take a look at some games that I've been playing and the performance that I get.
Gears up for water landing. 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 Stall. Gears up for water landing. Gears up for water landing. Gears up for water landing.
Would His Majesty allow us to enter the city by his side?
I allow. Where do we start?
Well, what do you want to see?
Everything.
We'll try.
Hello, piggies.
Roasted meat! Come taste it!
The closure is just a precaution. Because of the arena pigs, you know?
Oh, yes. I heard all the livestock from the whole arena is gone.
Dead sick. It stinks like hell over there.
The fish auction's starting soon. Aren't you going?
No, I'm here for the big cattle show tomorrow. on the Jedi!
What's that? Checking out the disturbance.
Oh, that hurts.
Hold it! Don't move! How'd you get here?
Easy now.
Got a stowaway.
Hey, you don't need to call this in.
Gotcha. Hear that over the comm? Jedi? Stay sharp. They won't get past us. The traitor! Blast him! Am I all that's left? Contact confirmed. Shoot to kill. Had to take a shot! Stand still. Come on, don't let him get you. I sealed the cargo door.
One way out. Gotta keep moving.
I chose to rest instead. That's how I prepare.
That's how you prepare for death. Rest when you're dead, Stormtrooper. Did you hear that too?
Enemy! Enemy here!
That's right.
I don't want to die here! Hurry, get him! Fugitive comes this way, I'm ready for it. Jedi! Jedi! Yeah, I got him. Come on and fight us. Can anyone hit him? Smash him. We don't even have to try here. Stop slipping away.
Get to the front. Stop the train. Oh no! Need cover. Gotta move in between bursts. Now. Faster!
He's here. I'm ready for you, Trigger.